And can I also request everyone to please switch off their phones? Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sudeshna Thapa from Social Science Baha, and I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of Social Science Baha. And thank you so much for joining us today at this event to mark the release of what is a very timely book by Professor Joanna Pfaff-Czarnecka, Belonging in Motion, Contested Social Boundaries in South Asia. Professor Pfaff-Czarnecka has a very long association with Nepal, and as most of us are very well aware, has made significant contribution to the study of inequality and globalization, and the concept of belonging. Belonging in Motion, Contested Social Boundaries in South Asia being her most recent work. The book is a collection of essays focused on the dynamic interactions of community, inequality, and power in Nepal and India from the venture point of belonging, understood as an interplay of commonality, mutuality, and attachments. It draws upon empirical cases while offering new conceptual tools for grasping the dynamic forces of belonging in contemporary world. The book has been published under the aegis of the Nanda R. and Pamela L. Shrestha Fund for honoring Nepal scholars. And the event today is the first in the series of the events conducted under the aegis of the fund. Needless to say, we are very proud and honored to have Professor Pfaff-Czarnecka here with us today on this occasion. I would also like to thank and welcome all our esteemed speakers seated on the dais: Pranika Koyu, Anju Pandit, Binod Pokhrel, and Sagar Raj Sharma for agreeing to share their reflections today on this very important book. We are all very eager to listen to what our speakers have to say about the book. Without further ado, I now request our first speaker, Pranika Koyu, to share her thoughts on the book. Koyu is a writer and a human rights professional. Over to you, Pranika ji.
Thank you, Sudeshna ji. Thank you, Social Science Baha, for thinking that I could comment on this book called Belonging in Motion. As soon as I was asked if I would be interested, and when I asked for what the book is about, and when Deepadai said the title, I was like, yes, I would like to. And then, why did I say that? Why did I say that I was interested? Though I do not have academic background, and I'm very scared of speaking in public on such, writings. First of all, let me start with my introduction. My name is Pranika Koyu, and I belong from indigenous community which is called Koyi in Nepal. And those who know the language, they write Koyi. Those who do not know the language, they write Koyu. I was 3 months old when my parents came from Bhojpur in 1978. And Joanna came to Nepal in 1979. I am one of those from the generation after first Janmat Sangra, after the Panchayat era began. Those who have seen lots of the important political transitions in this country, which raised many issues, and the movement, whether it is identity or class or caste, all those social justice, talks around social justice, they've been in continuum since then. And whether I liked it or not, I had to live through it, through all these political transitions. And in all of that, I held like multiple identities. I was a woman, I was a daughter, I was an indigenous woman, I'm an aspiring writer, and I've recently become a mother with a child who is in disability spectrum. So all these identities, also like all these identities that were supposed to make me feel at home or make me feel belonged. What am I doing? What do I want to do? Where did I fit in? I never felt belonged. And why? I mean, this was something that I have been continuously discussing, talking with my friends, and to some extent the answer I would find in the first chapter of this book, which is From Identity to Belonging in Social Research, Plurality, Social Boundaries, and the Politics of the Self. So, when you are in a country like Nepal, as diverse in culture, linguistics, I mean, like you name it. It's a small country, but it's so diverse. And then one identity cannot ascribe to what you are, to who you are, to what you do. And in such context, how do people see you? What do you do? How do they perceive who you are? And the opportunities, like the way it shapes your personality, the way it shapes your social networks, the way it shapes your aspirations, what it is, and what is the conflict in all of that. Even though you identify yourself as indigenous, how does indigenous movement see you? Or how does this movement see your issues, your concerns? So all those questions came into my mind, and while I was reading this book, especially the two chapters, the 1 and 2, the second one is debating the state of the nation, ethnicization of politics in Nepal, opposition paper. So when I was reading these, the writings evoked a lot of reflections in my mind, like a lot of reflections in the experiences I've had since I was a child, old enough to understand what that was, old enough to observe what was happening around, and old enough to accept that there are certain things which will be beyond your reach, that your life will be a constant struggle. So let me first, there is this example in the first chapter where, there is killing of Marwa El-Serbini by Alex Wiens, a right-wing extremist of Russian German, because he was a Muslim living in Germany, and he thought that there was no place for her. Like Germany was not a place for her. So when I read this example and the arguments that followed, I remembered that in South Asian context diaspora, how the caste-based discrimination has traveled all the way to Australia, Europe, and America. How despite of being in so-called progressive countries, the elite high caste, so-called high caste individuals are still practicing caste-based untouchability discrimination in those countries. And how even though you have migrated for, like a better life, a dignified life, you still are belittled for the fact that you were born into certain caste, or for the fact that you were born into certain ethnic groups. So basically, my sharings is just about like how I felt, what were the things that triggered my memory or my learning or my observation that I've already told. So when I moved to the second chapter, which is more of interest to me, because like I said, since 1978 till date, Nepal has constantly been in political, instability or transitions or revolutions, like whatever we call it.
He stayed in that house where you can not even stand. So when I try to relate, I got goosebumps. How she started her journey. A lady born in Germany in an elite family, she had everything she wanted. Why did she choose Bazhang? I had big question. But when I again referred back to my childhood, she was the first lady, educated lady I have ever seen. Being educated lady, she was the person who implanted the seed of a daughter getting degree in my mother's heart. So that's why my mother was there when my father was there with a proposal, marriage proposal. After my bachelor, my mother, uneducated lady, she was stand there with the argument that I want my daughter to get a degree before she get married. So this was first influence of Joanna Ji on my life. I don't know about intersectionality, I don't know about inequalities, but gender empowerment is main issue even in ethnic groups. So this is one of the biggest thing. Next thing, she was the first person to make me understand that there are books outside the course book. I had no idea. She was the first person to introduce me, to take me to Mandala bookstore, and she asked me to choose the book I want. I had no idea. So what to choose? And at that time, during I think 1996, she bought me a 2,000 rupees book. At that time, gold was even 7,000 like tola. So she bought me 2,000 rupees encyclopedia, which I only read after I passed my recital because I was not very comfortable with English. But the thing that she implanted in me has transformed my life, not only for me, but for my children as well, because now I am mother of 2 kids, 10 and 12. In every birthday, I give them the book, because this is the legacy that I carry from Joanna. She was the lady, and this is not limited to my family. And she was the first person to trust me as researcher in EU project on it, it was environment and indigenous group. She trusted me to carry on research, my first job, where I got the opportunity to know what is research. And then later on, now I am full-time researcher at ICIMOD and USAID as well. And it is all her influence. Now I have gained 2 degrees, Masters in Environment Science and Masters in Water Resource Management, recently from Australian government scholarship, recently in 2020. So this is all influence of this lady in my life. And now I can say that I am an empowered woman in standing in front of you. So it's all because of Joanna. So I'd like to thank Joanna for everything that is. So no, I'm not saying to praise, just for the sake of words. This is all that is coming directly from my heart. So this is all the background. So I'd like to go into the book. Please bear with me. I don't know much about sociology, anthropology. So I chose the easiest topic among them. That is actually, which I can relate. It is in chapter 7, kinship, friendship and in migratory practices, the case study of Nepal night watchmen in Bangalore. Because I chose this topic because it will be easier for me to talk about it. I know the context somehow. When I was reading through the chapter, I noticed that when I was in the village, or I was in Kathmandu, listening the stories of my uncles, grandfathers who were in Bangalore as guards and watchmen in there, I had no idea how it started. And I had lots of stories from different persons, but they were standing alone like as dots. I don't know. They said that there was a gambling issue. They said that there was an issue of person knowing each other that was helping others. So I had no issue, no understanding what they are talking about. But after reading this chapter, I found that I was able to connect the dots. And I was so surprised that even everyday, day-to-day activities had the social theories behind it. I was so surprised. I had no idea. And she talked in the book about the out migration, which is actually biggest issue right now. The migration is in the Middle East. Migration is in the America, Europe. But migration that started long ago from Jai Prithvi Bahadur Singh from Bajang, it was in Bangalore. So she properly raised the issue of out migration 30 to 40 years back. And she explained every bit of thing, how people take advantage of their friendship, kinship, when they go to a new place, how they get support from their immediate friends, families in that scenario, how the caste and other hierarchy are broken when they are in need of. For example, a Brahmin person traveled to Bangalore and he doesn't have any other, so he can even rely to other castes. So how there is a like how what is it? There is a saying, "Mazburi ka naam Mahatma Gandhi" in Hindi. When you are compelled, you break all the boundaries. How the social boundaries are broken by this transformation. So this was really well highlighted. As I already told, she has well connected the dots along with backing up with the anthropological, sociological theories. So in this, I got very good picture how it started, how it was going on, and how it played a very good role in interconnection of dots. But one thing I found is that it was very well written as a historical thing, but now the context is changing. There are lots of other new issues which I have heard from my relatives who are staying there in Bangalore. So as next phase of research, we could dig out on the issues, how these transformations are getting into new pros and cons due to out-migration in Bangalore. So this could be the revised version. In my case, we can work together. So thank you so much for listening to me. Please forgive me for my flaws. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anju ji, for that very riveting and deeply personal deliberation. Adding to what Anju ji has said, I just want to emphasize that the importance of the concept of belonging in contemporary social science research cannot indeed be overstated, and that the book does a great job of sending that message across. I would now like to request our third speaker, Professor Binod Pokhrel, to share his reflections on the book with us. Pokhrel is a professor at the Central Department of Anthropology, Tribhuvan University. Over to you, Professor Pokhrel.
Thank you. Good afternoon and namaste. I know Professor Joanna Pfaff-Czarnecka for a long time. It may be, I think, 2005, when I was the PhD fellow of the media project in 2005. And she was working here in Nepal for 4 decades in Nepal. And she has carried out many research studies in remote villages of Nepal. Just Panditji mentioned about the research in Bajang. And she has also, her contribution has added a great value in general in anthropology of Nepal and Himalayan anthropology in particular. And she has also, her contribution is immense contribution to the Tribhuvan University, particularly the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And still she is helping the Nepalese students from the social sciences in her Bielefeld University. I also got an opportunity going in Bielefeld University in 2006. And one interesting thing is here in Nepal, scholars or anthropologists rarely come back to their ethnographic site after the completion of their research work. However, Professor Joanna Pfaff and some others are continuously working in Nepal for their research and the institutional development of academic institutions in Nepal. That is the great contribution to Nepal. Now, I'll talk brief about the book. I would like to thank Deepak Thapa and Professor Joanna Pfaff giving me such a opportunity to speak few words about this book. I got this book, the last manuscript, a week ago. Thanks for Deepak Thapa. Then I went through the all book, and here I will briefly say something about each chapter. That is my reflection. And this book is divided into 9 chapters. You already got 8, and including the interview of the Joanna Pfaff in the 9th chapter. And the articles presented in this book were already published in journals and edited books in the past. The present book helps the readers to read Professor Pfaff's work under the concept of the belonging in one collection. That is the good thing. Otherwise, we have to search from the many sources to know our idea. And our department, I also say that our department has put the book, The Politics of Belonging in the Himalayas, Local Attachments and Boundary Dynamics. This book is edited by Joanna Pfaff and Gerald Tofa in 2011, and we are put under the Political Anthropology course in our department, Department of Anthropology. And concept of belonging is a recurring theme in her academic works. This is the interesting thing. This collection focuses on the dynamic interaction of the community, inequality, power in Nepal and India, which were key issues when the author started her research 40 years back. And these themes are of academic concerns. This collection lies under the subfield of political anthropology. All chapters largely fit into the concept of belonging. Belonging is a dynamic concept that helps to understand caste, ethnicity, transnationalism in the context of Nepal and South Asia. The author has clearly distinguished how belonging is different from mutuality, identity, and attachment. Belonging is not fixed as it shifts according to time and context. Unlike identity construction scholars, identity as a categorical concept is insufficient and inadequate to combine the categorization with social relation. For the author, belonging rationality consists in forging and maintaining social sites and buttressing commitment and obligation. Showing clearly the distinction between identity and belonging, the author states that identity caters to dichotomous characterization of the social, while belonging rather highlights its situatedness and multiplicity of parameters forging commonality, mutuality, and attachment. I borrowed these words from our book. Debating the state of nation is an interesting chapter. Unlike the other scholars, the author of this book sees Nepal's ethnic problem differently. There are two contrasting concepts, melting pot ideologies and cultural heterogeneity. Many scholars show the hegemonic treatment of minorities in Nepal. They portray the causes of this phenomena as assimilation through the Hindu ideology and Hindu nation state. Of course, Hindu ideology is one of the factors in the assimilation of small minorities. However, assimilation is not only a state project, but a process where small groups have been mixed up with each other. In this regard, Khemraj Nepal, senior anthropologist, and former secretary, the government of Nepal, questions whether assimilation is a byproduct of circumstances or self-protection or necessity. In his book, recently published book, Mishrit Jat Jati Hami Nepali. I was also the reviewer of that book a month ago. According to him, there are no pure groups and all groups have been mixed up in Nepal. His works raise the issue that the studies of assimilation process do not cover the micro level process of assimilation. Friction, Frames and Fragments is an interesting chapter of the book. The author demonstrates the substantial power inherent in Dasai ritual to provide the continuity in times of the radical change. Celebrating and not celebrating, Dasai was a contested field for the ethnic groups in Nepal. After the radical changes of the 1990s and 2006 and 7, the radius of the Dasai festival, including other Hindu festivals such as Tej, has expanded well beyond the Panchayat era. Therefore, why Hindu festivals are more accepted than past is unanswered in the identity and ethnicity literature. The chapter Changing Goliath Dams and the Paradox of the Transnational Critical Movement is based on dams and development of Sanjeev Khagaram and dams development, the dynamics of social inequality in hydropower project in Nepal by Kavita Rai. The author reinterpreted the cases based on human rights perspectives. The author has given attention to the environmental and human rights issue, including the civil society roles in dam projects in South Asia. According to author, the human rights issue is more fragmented and very selective knowledge of human rights abuses. Complex communities in Nepal, Himalaya, or solidarity, a global category and way of life, is theoretically based ethnographic chapter. The images of communal harmony, the various development project description evoke do not reflect the self-perception within the local society where complex communal forms are present. Distributional Coalition in Nepal discusses the governance in democratic transition. Taking the example from the Bajan, she shows how individual civil servants use their position to establish informal, horizontal and vertical networks within and outside their organization that were meant for the personal gain. Author shows inability to secure the accountability from the politicians and the bureaucrats. There is a good, interesting narration in the book. And kinship and friendship is a migratory practice. The case of Nepali night watchman in Bangalore is a very fascinating chapter. She shows the ambivalent character of kinship, two constellations characterized by the proximity of those belonging together. According to author, a kinship is a form of belonging that can confer on people both the highest degree of the feeling safe and warmth and trust, but it also creates coercion, oppression and suffering. Transnational communities thrive on kinship and friendship relations. And similarly, minorities in minorities in South Asian societies between politics of diversity and politics of difference is the chapter that talks about the internal heterogeneity of minority group coming to light. The interview section shows the whole career, interest and concept of belonging of the author. Finally, this book is byproduct of decades of rigorous work. The readings are equally important even today in terms of their concept, content and methodology. It is an intense reading. From the beginning, the author has been adopting the belongings as an analytical tool to understand the phenomenon. Belonging is not static but a dynamic phenomenon. There is more relevance to this concept in times of transnationalism. This is my understanding, reflection about the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Pokhrel, for your words and also for reminding us of Joanna's very important contributions to contemporary social science research in Nepal and beyond. I now request our fourth speaker, Professor Sagar Raj Sharma, to share his take on the book. Sharma is a professor at the School of Arts, Kathmandu University.
Thank you, and namaskar everybody. I'd like to thank the organizer for Debuji and Joanna for giving me this opportunity to say a few words on this very fascinating book, I would say. Much has already been said about the book and the chapters, so I'm not going to go repeat the chapters again. I'm just going to share a few of my own reflections from flipping through the pages of the book. I still have to read a few chapters, I have to admit, but from whatever I've read, I'd like to say how deeply engaging that book is. I think the significance of this book, as has been highlighted by the speakers earlier, lies not only in the fact that this is a very contemporary issue, but I think there's there's a very important methodological contribution to grasping the notion of belonging. Obviously, in social anthropology, in that field, but I would argue even beyond that. I am from a background of development studies, and I can see that this methodological argument, when you talk about, for example, migration, the different dynamics of migration from that time, when we we talked about, hill to Tarai migration, as was pointed out earlier, from maybe earlier days, but very few people actually knew about the Bazang to Bangalore migration, and trying to capture that dynamics, I think, can be also looked upon from a developmental perspective. Therefore, I see that a very useful analytical framework being in this book, where we can use it for analysis of collective constellations, the different constellations we have in our societies. And therefore, this volume, no doubt, should be of immense interest to students, obviously, of sociology, anthropology, social science in general, to scholars and practitioners in Nepal and India, because much has been drawn from Joanna's experience of working on the caste system and ethnicity in Nepal and in India, ethnicity formation, but also, very interestingly, in Europe, the religious differences in European countries, Middle European, the immigration societies. I mean, she draws a lot of experience from those accounts, those stories as well. Much is there. So therefore, I see this volume being useful not only for the academic interests and scholars and students of Nepal, India, of South Asia, but certainly in Europe as well. It will be of immense interest. It has, in fact, already drawn a lot of interest. I was a witness to that myself. I was fortunate to be to participate in Professor Joanna's valedictory lecture this summer, where at Bielefeld University, where she gave her official last lecture to her colleagues of the university. Apart from being awed by the sheer respect that was shown towards Joanna Pfaff's contribution, not only to the institution itself, to the department, to the university, but also the scholarly contributions she has made over the years. How the whole university colleagues and Joanna Pfaff belonged together, and were joined by this theme of belonging, which was one of her themes, among others too. She also works in other themes, but belonging is certainly one of the highlights, and that was clearly reflected by the remarks made by her colleagues, her seniors, her professors. And I could see that sense of belonging, that Joanna as an individual belonging to that institution, and the institution belonging to Joanna's concepts and contributions. So I that was fascinating for me to have witnessed that. Equally fascinating was her lecture itself, although it was entirely in German. I could understand only half of it. I mean, my broken German, but nevertheless, I could get the gist out of what she was saying, and I was told by other colleagues about what she said later on. She talked about her own trajectory of life, how she, Joanna, started her career, but even before she started her career, how she and her family from Eastern Europe, being raised, coming over to Western Europe, Switzerland, being raised, having studied there, and then making this wonderful, fascinating career out of her experiences and traveling across the world, and her career taking her down to Nepal in 79, 1979. And yeah, somebody asked her, why Nepal of all the places? She could have gone anywhere perhaps at that time as a young researcher, but somehow she was pulled to Nepal or taken to Nepal by different circumstances. That in itself is a fascinating story there. But also how she, after that, her career, after her experience in Nepal, goes to different parts, meets colleagues of this field, goes to the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Switzerland, and France. And then of course Nepal, India, Sri Lanka. That shapes her own, and that gives shapes to her idea of belonging. As she herself travels around the world, the notion of belonging is also getting to a more and more concrete shape, I could say. And that is reflected so aptly in this book. How the notion itself, a fluid notion, but getting more and more shape these days, and that from a very methodological angle. So I find that very interesting in her book. I mean, it's amazing insights from Nepal this book has, and I don't have to repeat here. I mean, needless to say, we have witnessed unprecedented changes in such a short span of time, and because of that, we have had to change, we've had to adapt, we've had to adjust, and we're changing yet again. We're continuously changing. It's a nation in transition, really. I mean, and you ask a very important question somewhere in the book as to, is democracy a topic for belonging? I find that very, very fascinating, because democracy in Nepal itself is a very fluid sort of notion. It's changing its shape. Democracy, as we understood it even 8 years ago, is now, people are thinking and asking different questions. So when the whole state, society, everything is changing, how do you give shape to the notion of belonging? You know? And hence this very apt title, Belonging in Motion. The notion itself is being changed. It's a very dynamic concept, and the titles also tries to capture that. I think, and that for me is really a methodological challenge as well, as to when we move forward, how do we capture belonging in a state of perpetual transition? But that itself that's what she's arguing. She accepts that it's a dynamic, it's a process, you write it. Belonging is an evocative, it's an evocative process, it's evocative in nature. As it has memories, it has images, it comes with your stories, reflections. So, and therefore the contrast with identity there, and how it steps much forward. So all in all, I find it methodologically, scholarly, a very, very engaging book. I would say perhaps in order to capture this changing dynamics, particularly for a country like Nepal, where everything is on the move always. Nepalese are on the move, have been on the move forever, and more so now than any other time perhaps. How do we really bring that methodological framework put together in order to capture the ongoing transition as well? That's a very fascinating question itself. It does attempt to answer those as well, but among others, that's a fascinating question, and I am yet to read a few more chapters, as I said, and I'll be talking to you more about the book later on once I finish it. But thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a few thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for your words and also for uncovering some very interesting ideas surrounding the concept of belonging that is explored in the book, particularly in the context of Nepal. Now, before I invite Joanna herself to speak, I would like to request all our speakers to please unveil the book. There's a copy of the book before you. Ajay, please. Thank you so much. I now request Professor Pfaff-Czarnecka herself to say a few words on the journey that has culminated into this book and also elaborate on some of the key ideas explored in the book. Pfaff-Czarnecka is a professor of social anthropology at the Faculty of Sociology, Bielefeld University, Germany. Until 2019, she served as a Senate member of the German Research Foundation, Dean of her faculty, and co-director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research, ZIF. Her current research focuses on knowledge production and circulation, on belonging, and on the social life of universities. Pfaff-Czarnecka also studied and worked at the University of Zurich. She also worked at the University of Bonn for several development organizations and for the International Committee of the Red Cross. She has also taught and visited at the universities of Bern, Oxford, Tokyo, New Delhi, Kathmandu, and Jawaharlal Nehru University. Over to you, Professor Czarnecka, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm incredibly touched and I feel very honored, and I think it is just wonderful to have today this event with you. I find in the room sitting several persons whom I've known for ages, who are really friends or even family, but I'm also delighted to see or to meet persons whom I never met before, or maybe about whose work I knew. So I'm very grateful to Pranika that she agreed to be today on the podium. And Sudeshna, you're also doing a great job. And about my 3 colleagues whom I've known for ages, I shall mention them in a moment. But above all, I should like very much thank Deepak Thapa and Social Science Baha. I mean, whenever I deal with Deepak and or on behalf of Social Science Baha, this is always about knowledge, this is about quality, this is about going into depth, it is about absolutely perfect organization. So Deepak, thank you so much that you made this book possible, and that you gave it such a shape, and also that you gave the shape of today's day. I think this is really an event I will always carry in my heart. Well, I want to say a few words about the book. I decided that I'm not going to introduce the individual chapters. I have to say that the way how Binod did it was amazing. Yeah, so in a very brief form, giving highlights of individual chapters, it is great. I was afraid if I do so, this may be a bit boring. So what I will do is to say a few words about what I understand by this term belonging in motion, and then to concentrate on 3 aspects that I wanted to highlight with the book, and in particular with the new introduction. Whenever we think about belonging, I think the very original idea when we think about belonging is to see belonging as something being stable, putting us in place. This is what provides us a feeling of safety and providing us with the capacity to rely upon social relations and joint cultural characteristics. Belonging is also very much about providing a sense of stability in our emotions, and also something that is very sensory. I always loved this phrase, hava pani milcha, and this is precisely belonging, yes? And I don't think that you have a better term for putting belonging into very simple words. But at the same time, belonging is really something that is continuously changing. And Sagar is absolutely right in saying, well, belonging is a process. So we are fascinated in change. I think all of us are very much interested in being mobile, in moving to new geographical places, maybe being socially mobile, adopting new ideas. We like to be in flux. And I think most of us sitting here, we want to shape the world. So we like to rely on what is there, but also conceptualize of how can we contribute to the world, maybe to make it become a better place. And as we are shaping the world, we are also often thinking about shaping ourselves. I mean, don't believe Anju. I certainly did not have the contribution that she was giving me today. But if I had some importance in your growing up, then I'm of course the most happiest person, because it is very important, especially when we are becoming elder educators, to know that there is a lot to be done for younger generations, and it is very important also to be attentive to the people around us. We will never know how can we contribute. I should like to mention Zygmunt Bauman. Zygmunt Bauman was an English sociologist of Polish origin. I like to relate to him because I find him very bright, but he's the same emigration as I was from Poland. He went to England. My father's brother's family went to England. We went to Switzerland. I was a political refugee. I got asylum in Switzerland, and I spent 8 years in Switzerland with a stateless status, and this certainly shaped my thinking. Zygmunt Bauman made a very interesting opposition. He said, we can think of belonging in two senses. One belonging is the rooted belonging. Another one form of belonging is anchored belonging. So we throw an anchor and then we build up attachments around this anchor. Usually we think about belonging in the sense of root. So when there is a root, this is of course immobilizing us, but it can be very deep in the ground. The root gives us a form, because the root determines the form, how we are going to grow up, how our communities will be shaped. This is already predetermined, so this is something primordial. And I have to say that being a refugee myself, I do not have much sense of what it means to be rooted. But I could, for instance, see when I was walking with Nirmalji, who is sitting here around Asantol, how the closer we came to your ancestral home, the more people were greeting you. And I really envied you always that, you have this kind of very dense belonging people, with so many people still in the place from which you came from. And I had the impression that the way how you very creatively moved in the world, you could very well connect your rooted belonging to also new forms of belonging, but you have something I don't have, yeah? I have a sense what it means to be rooted within family relations, and I think very high of my family relations, but I do not have the sense of having a place to which I naturally belong. So maybe not this sense of warmth or safety, and also maybe not this sense of obligation that can be also quite demanding. I mean, I can see all the demands put upon people who have this very strong sense of belonging. And this anchored belonging, this is about finding new attachments, creating belonging, willingly or unwillingly, because maybe I fall in love with someone from outside of my community. This can put a lot of stress on me and on my relatives, so it is not necessarily by choice. So love marriage can be one thing that makes us somehow anchor create an anchored belonging. Forced migration is another one, but I can also feel uncomfortable in my old world, because maybe I have problems with my class position, maybe I have problems because I do not abide to normativities within my family, for instance, having other sexual orientations. So we are made compelled to somehow find new ways of belonging, and these choices can be very painful. At the same time, I think more and more people, even in this part of the world, they love the freedom to choose and to forge our attachments, and the creativity going along with this may be very interesting. I also like another distinction that Bauman made. He said, on one hand, we love the safety of belonging. On the other hand, we like freedoms. And safety and freedom can be at odds with one another. When I want to feel very safe within my community, I'm giving up on my sense of freedom, that I want to forge my life, that I decide how I allocate my time and my commitments. So that's why I gave this book the title Belonging in Motion, because I can see how the world everywhere, and also here in Nepal, how the constellations are changing, how we are making choices, and also the scope of mobilities that are very important. I started thinking about putting several of in my view, of my best texts into a book, because I felt that my writings are too scattered, and I wanted to collect them. I also wanted to think about the text, read them again, and to see what kind of form they should be given. I confess that I submitted this collection first to Oxford University Press, and I was very happy that within 3 weeks they said they would be very interested in publishing this. Then I put it aside, I was busy, and then I started thinking, well, but I think I would like to have this book being published by a Nepali publisher. I would like it to be somehow embedded here, that it is very natural that it will be sold at local bookshops. So I addressed Deepak and asked him whether he thinks that a Nepali publisher would be interested, and Deepak said, yes, we would be interested. And then I knew I prefer to publish it with Social Science Baha, with Himal publishers, rather with an external publisher. I also had a recent book coming with OUP Press, so I felt, well, good enough. So let us concentrate now on this, and I'm very happy about how it came out. I don't think that another publisher would have done such a good job. As Pranika was already mentioning, I mean, some of the texts have been written already quite a while ago, and indeed, of course, nowadays I would talk of indigeneity. Today we have significantly more research on activism and also conditions among different ethnic groups or indigenous groups in Nepal that didn't have acquired this amount of attention in previous times. I also realized over the last 20 years that nowadays there's so much research on Nepal conducted by Nepali researchers that I really can step aside and abandon certain topics, and for me it is still very important to enter into conversations with Nepali scholars who work about their own societies. But I'm absolutely convinced that we need to exchange, we need to negotiate, and that we must be multi-perspective in our work. And indeed, I gave this book the title Belonging in Motion, but until 2006 or 7, I was not using the notion of belonging. So this term came post factum. This term came about when I had a conversation with Gérard Dauphin in Paris. I remember how my very dear colleague David Gellner, who also wrote the foreword to this book, how he said, I'm still not buying the concept of belonging. He said this about 10 years ago. In the meantime, David also published a number of texts with the notion of belonging. So it took a lot of time to think about this. And in the meantime, I think this is a perfect term for thinking about relations of ethnicity, caste relations, community, for instance, in the context of forced evictions. And yes, as it was already suggested by both, by Binod and by Sagar, political participation is about belonging, because when I can shape politically the world within which I dwell, then this forges my sense of belonging. But it is also very important to think about different kinds of complexities, like minorities within minorities, because any communities, even when they want to think about themselves as absolutely homogeneous, they are very complex with different kinds of complications within communities. I don't want to take much more time, but I should like just to highlight 3 aspects very briefly. The first aspect is that belonging is very much about our choices, how we experience belonging, how maybe the most vital, important idea of our belonging is that it is so self-evident that we don't need to think even in terms of belonging. We are just are, we are in place. But belonging is nowadays an object of negotiation, so my belonging can be curtailed by outsiders. And that's why politics of belonging is becoming so important, because most constellations of belonging are nowadays evolving under political conditions. So this was my first point, that belonging is about negotiations between me, us, and the others. The second point is that belonging evolves within social political hierarchies. Here in Nepal, we know very well that these hierarchies are shaped by state formation, by different forms of inequalities, state power, and the way how caste and ethnic groups were ordered within a very rigid framework is a very important aspect of creating belonging that can be very oppressive to members of communities. But this is not just about the relationships between indigenous groups and state hierarchies or state power, but also patriarchal norms can impinge upon internal modalities of belonging, and also different kinds of normalities or normativities within which we think can be very oppressive to individuals. And the third point I want to make is the process of boundary making. So belonging is a constellation between individuals, collectivities, state, and this is always about hedging, because we want to have our world to be neat and clear-cut. So we want to know what are the boundaries of the social. So we like setting boundaries, but when we are striving to belong somewhere, like for instance, as I was striving to become member of the Swiss society, as I was striving to be accepted within Nepal, or when I was striving to get acceptance within academia, of course it was also about transgressing boundaries, and I think we all are interested in transgressing boundaries, in pushing boundaries, but sometimes maybe without wanting to do so, we are also hedging boundaries. So there is this notion of dirty work of boundary maintenance, and we are all the time involved in fighting over boundaries, more or less unconsciously. And this is of course important whether belonging is something rooted or something anchored. In any case, belonging nowadays is very much a process in motion. It is very challenging, it is unavoidable, and it is incredibly creative. So I look very much forward to our conversations on belonging. I'm certainly going to continue in this vein. Today I work about, as you said, about knowledge production and circulation, forging belonging within academia. So this is where I stand nowadays, and I would be very interested what you make of belonging, how you can relate to my ideas, and how we can maybe cooperate in future. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Sudeshna. Thank you, Pranika. Thank you, Anju. Thank you, Binod. Thank you, Sagar. Thank you, Deepak. And thank you, dear friends who are here, old and new. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Professor Pfaff-Czarnecka. I think I will be speaking for everyone when I say that we can all relate to your exploration of the concept of belonging on some personal level. Your words have piqued our interest in the book even more, and we all look forward to reading the book. I'd like to inform everyone who has joined us today that the book will soon be available for sale at bookstores in Kathmandu, and we can all grab ourselves a copy. With that, I'd like to thank everyone once again for making it here today, this Friday afternoon, and wish everyone a very happy, healthy, and safe Dasai. Please feel free to help yourselves to tea and coffee outside the hall, and also browse through the book sale that has been set up outside the hall as well. Thank you so much again. Thank you.